when they close the door, so I'll get started. Can everyone hear me okay? I don't think I need a mic of this size. So, thank you for coming. My name is Zamboni. I work at CFEngine. I would like to first get a sense of the room. So I'd like to ask you for a quick show of hands, how many people have heard of CFEngine? Oh, evidently almost everyone since you're here. Without counting the people from CFEngine themselves, how many people here have used CFEngine at some point in their careers? Well, that's a lower number. How many people last used CFEngine more than 5 years ago? Okay, well, then you've been missing a lot. So we get a lot of the CFEngine is old technology. Almost everyone knows CFEngine. It's been around for almost 20 years. And pretty much single-handedly created the open source configuration management arena. But a lot of people tried CFEngine back in the CFEngine 1 or 2 days, and they discarded it for any reason. And those are usually the people that go around saying that CFEngine is old and outdated and blah, blah, blah. Whereas the latest alpha release of the newest version of CFEngine was released just last week. CFEngine 3 came out in 2008, and it's a completely new and different thing from previous versions. It's got very improved capabilities for a lot of things. And it is in production out there. Both CFEngine 2 and 3 are in production at very, very large sites that, if I may say so myself, are hard to reach for some of the other configuration management platforms out there. Just last night at dinner, we met a guy who told us he's running 200,000 hosts on a combination of CFEngine 2 and 3. And that's because he's in the process of migrating from 2 to 3. So it's definitely out there. It has very nice capabilities, very lightweight. It's written entirely in C, so you don't get any Ruby or other dependencies when you try to install it or upgrade it. It's very lightweight for the same reason. So CFEngine essentially runs on any version of Unix you could think of, as long as you have the appropriate. It requires 3 libraries to compile, which are very common. And we have proof of concept of CFEngine running on Android devices, on routers, on storage devices, on embedded controller cards and things like this. So it's really very easy to deploy and to integrate with different platforms. So CFEngine is one of the things that can make it very easy to migrate from legacy technology, so to speak, to newer things, because it can very easily manage the transition and what's going on in the systems. But anyhow, this is not supposed to be a sales or a marketing pitch, so let me tell you what we're here to talk about. So one of the problems that we have had with CFEngine over the years is the lack of sharing. For some reason, we've discovered that a lot of sysadmins are very protective of their configurations. And I think it has to do maybe with a little bit of a false sense of paranoia. It's the same reason why many people don't share their network structure or their network configurations, because they feel that this will expose them somehow to attack or to exploitation of weaknesses, which could be true depending on how things are structured. But this is how it's been for many years. So if you look for CFEngine examples and policies out there, it's very hard to find. It has been in the past very hard to find. There are some people who share things on their own website or blog or FTP site or wherever, but without any sort of good structure. And that was also caused partly because there was no good place and no good way for people to share these things. So everyone did it if they did it on their own terms. So this has been somewhat of a problem, and it has somewhat fueled this idea that CFEngine is hard to get started with, because people looking for examples often had a hard time finding them. So what do we want? What we would want with CFEngine, as with any other platform, is to have an accumulation and sharing of knowledge and expertise. One of the things that CFEngine 3 introduces that is different from CFEngine 2 is the ability to encapsulate knowledge and to encapsulate code that represents this knowledge and then reuse it all over the place. So now we have the ability to define units of CFEngine policy code that can be reused from multiple places. So this opens the door much more than ever before to sharing things, because now someone else can load that code and call it from their own policy and do something useful. So for example, we would like ideally to have all sorts of components that help us configure the time zone and the networking and the hosts and the users, install an application, configure a database, configure a web server, combine them and give us a fully functional host that is running an application, WordPress in this case. Now these components should be able to be written by different people. Well, just like you have code repositories for most programming languages, where you can pull and mix things that have been written by disparate sets of people, and then use them in a coherent way. So with CFEngine, this becomes more important than ever, because you can have pieces of CFEngine code that do fairly complex things, like deploy cluster of database servers configured in a certain way that we can then use. And if we can make it so that someone else can take this code and then without too much pain use it in their infrastructure, suddenly we open the possibility of deploying very complex IT infrastructure with very little effort, and without having to learn the CFEngine policy language, which is not hard to learn, but some people feel that this is a barrier, and it is, as small as it is, it can be a barrier. So what we came up with, and this is the main topic of this talk, is what we call the CFEngine Design Center. So the Design Center is meant to be a place for both CFEngine users and developers and engineers to share things. And there's three main types of things that we want to share in the Design Center. One of them is policy examples. So just people who have useful bits of policy code that they've written and they want to share them with the world. They can just upload them with zero preparation, just dump them there, and have them available for other people to see. We can share tools, so scripts and tools of other kinds that people have written over time. So editing modes for VI or for Emacs or for TextMate or all sorts of things like this can be put there. And the main type of component that we want people to share are what we call sketches. So sketches are pieces of CFEngine code that have a particular structure that makes it possible for them to be loaded and reused without touching the actual code. So they are parameterized pieces of CFEngine code that you can then just load and give the parameters they want and then deploy them and have them do something useful and connect among them and help you deploy and manage your infrastructure. We have a tool called CFSketch that helps you manage these things, and it's all open source. It's hosted on GitHub because, I mean, for something like this to work, it has to be a community project. It cannot be something that just us are contributing to. It has to be driven by the community. So the easy part in all of this was setting up the GitHub repository. I want to tell you a little bit about the history of this project. So that's easy, and that was on very soon. And it's been growing over the last few months. This is a fairly nascent project, but part of my purpose in coming here and telling you guys about it is that we can increase the participation and have it grow, because it's one of these things that as it becomes bigger, it becomes more useful, and then that helps it become bigger, and it's hopefully a snowball effect. Now, the hard parts, of course, are making sure that it actually works, that the components and the structure that we come up with are powerful enough for people to actually do useful things with them. we want to make it easy for people to contribute, so it has to be clear how you write a new sketch, how you upload it to the repository, what's the process for getting it into the repository. And of course that leads to getting more people to participate, which is our ultimate goal in all of this. So let's look at this point. So is it powerful enough? Well, yeah, some parts, of course, they are. CFEngine is a powerful tool, has a powerful policy language, and it has a set of features that make it very easy to write this sort of. So CFEngine is different from other tools in the sense that it's not very strict about the order in which things happen. So it tries to determine by itself what order things should occur in, and it's not strict about having a deterministic chain of events that leads up to a successful configuration. So if one of the steps fails, then CFEngine will say, okay, this failed, I'll try again, and I'll try other pieces. And the idea is that over time, the configuration will converge to a stable state. If something breaks along the way, so if you're trying to configure something and suddenly at that point your network connection is down, well, that may fail, but other parts of the configuration will succeed, and it will try again very soon. By default, CFEngine runs on a 5-minute cycle. So very soon it will try again, and it'll keep trying until it succeeds. And if it never succeeds, well, it will tell you about it, so you can do something. So CFEngine continuously checks on itself and on the system and keeps trying to bring it to a stable state. CFEngine is a declarative language, so you tell it your desired end state for the system and not necessarily the steps that you have to take and the sequence that you have to follow to get to that desired end state. And that makes it very resilient to failure and very flexible in how things can be done. Now, not everything was a field of roses in this path, and as we started working on mixing together components written by different people, we came upon some problems. So one of the problems was that when you start having code that has been written by different sets of people, well, you have to make sure that they don't interfere with each other. And one of the problems that we encountered was the possibility for naming conflicts, because so far, up to a previous version of CFEngine, the identifiers were all global. Most of them were global in certain circumstances. So we started having naming conflicts. We encountered some problem in managing parameters that get passed between the different units and the metadata about the different bundles, which are groups of promises. And we saw that, well, while it was definitely possible to get values in and out of a sketch, we had to resort to certain trickery to do it in a flexible and scalable way. So what did we do? Well, we leaned on the development team and we got them to code some of these things to make the necessary changes. So this has led to a major number of improvements in recent versions of CFEngine that you will see in the new 3.4 version of CFEngine that is coming out. Actually, the alpha releases are out there, so you can try them out. And the final version should be released in a few weeks. So we have major new features that make it much easier for us to write sketches in CFEngine. We're introducing namespaces. So now you can have separate namespaces where your identifiers live, and this makes it possible to avoid conflicts. We can have default parameter values. We can have bundle metadata and bundle return values and bundle level status of things. This may not make much sense if you're not familiar with the CFEngine policy language, but bundles are collections of promises. So it's like a subroutine in some other programming languages. And CFEngine has always had the concept of the status of a single promise, whether that promise was successful or it was repaired or it was not successful. Now this has been aggregated to the bundle level, so we can have a group level status of whether the things inside succeeded. We can also now return arbitrary values from the bundles, which makes it easier to communicate. So for example, if I have a sketch that installs a web server, it can now tell me back after it runs where the document group is, for example, or what port it's listening on, or what plugins are installed, or any other information that needs to be passed back. And there's an attribute that has existed in CFEngine for a long time called depends on, which had always been just informative. So we could say this promise depends on some other promise, and this was used in the knowledge management features of CFEngine, which is a completely different topic. I'll be happy to tell you more about it after the talk. But it was purely informative. As of this version, depends on has an active role. So if you say a promise depends on something else, then it's a shortcut for saying this promise cannot execute until that other one has been successfully evaluated. So all of these are features. Some of them are a bit of syntactic sugar, some of them are deeper changes that make it easier for CFEngine to operate in this multi-developer, multi-sysadmin environment that we're trying to introduce with the Design Center, where you can just grab components from different places or from different people and use them to build your own infrastructure without having to go into the code and modify it too much. The other thing that I mentioned was that we want to make these things easy to write. And the main point here is that the Design Center is not meant to be a tool that you use. It's meant to be a platform on which you build other things. So some people have described it as an IDE for CFEngine. And the idea is that, well, you can have all of these components and you can use them as they are, but you can also bring them in and then write your own policy and just call out to them as you need to create more complex things. And you can, as we have a lot of ideas of where this will go, but for example, composition of sketches is clearly something that we want to make it easy to do, so you can bring multiple components and then add something of your own and build a more complex, more complete structure. We have a fair bit of documentation already, but this keeps improving on how to write new sketches and how to use them. We need additional tooling to make it easy to write. So one of the things that we want to write is a tool that can take an arbitrary bundle of promise that you wrote on your own and then converts it into the appropriate structure for you to submit it as a sketch with all the metadata and the parameters and the things like this. And we have all of these intercommunication mechanisms between the sketches and the rest of the policy, or between different components of the policy. What we need is to come up with appropriate conventions so that everyone knows what to expect and how to use these mechanisms. And of course, we would like to invite all of you to participate. If you have not looked at CFEngine in a while, I really encourage you to do so. Come by our booth or see me, and I'll give you a free copy of the CFEngine 3 book from O'Reilly, so that you can check it out and you can see what it can do. Check out CFEngine. It's really easy to install. One of the things that CFEngine had for many years was that it had a reputation for being hard to get started with. Well, that has completely been solved. It's really easy to install. It's a single command to install if you're using a binary package, and it's a single command to bootstrap it and have it ready to run. So it's really a very simple process. Check out the Design Center. It's growing. It's still smallish, but growing, and we think it has some very unique and very cool capabilities for the sort of things that you can do because of the combination with the capabilities that CFEngine has. Of course, we're certainly open to receiving contributions of code, contributions of ideas, and contributions in documentation or in tricks or whatever else you want to talk about. So let me have the CFEngine standard library, which is a collection of components that you can easily call from your policies. That's available as a sketch. One of the most powerful and interesting sketches we have at this moment, and there's a lot of hiding behind each one of these names. Cloud services is a sketch that allows you to manage cloud infrastructure. At the moment, it has support for EC2 and for VMware infrastructure. And it's really cool because you tell it, I need 10 instances of EC2 virtual machines of this type. And that's it, you let it run. And then CFEngine, it's not something that you have to type on the command line, start giving a new instance, give me a new instance, give me another one. You just express it in the policy. And then CFEngine will check whether this condition is satisfied. You tell it, I need 15 instances. I'll say, okay, how many you have? You have 0. Okay, let me start 15 instances and configure them accordingly. If one of these instances goes away, for example, or crashes for any reason, then CFEngine will, because it's checking all the time, it's not a one-time operation, it's continuously checking that the conditions are satisfied. It'll say, oh, you need 1 more, or you need 3 more, and then it goes and creates them automatically. So it will constantly maintain the infrastructure in the state in which you want it to be, without having to be mucking around with the command line to make it so. And it also works the other way. So if you suddenly say, well, now I only need 5, well, it will destroy those that it needs to be destroyed to bring it to the number that you specify. And you can do very interesting things with this capabilities, because think that you combine this with the abilities that CFEngine has to monitor the systems. So you can monitor things like CPU load, network load, user load, disk utilization, and now you can condition the existence of this this cloud infrastructure instances on the conditions of other things in your systems, other things in your policies. So you now have the basics for automatic and very flexible manipulation of your infrastructure that responds dynamically to what's going on. So if you suddenly see a high increase in CPU load in your instances, well, maybe I'll give me 10 more virtual machines to spread the load. And this all can happen automatically, and it's very cool to see it happen in real time. We have a sketch for installing and configuring different types of database engines. So this particular one at the moment has support for MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite, and more are coming. We have a sketch that helps in integrating Nagios plugins into CFEngine. So it gives you the ability to run an Nagios plugin and then fetch the information and feed it into CFEngine as classes and variables that you can then use in your policy. We have a number of sketches for managing software. So for installing Perl modules, for example, using cpan, for maintaining Yum and APT repositories for RPM and Debian packages. We have a number of security-related sketches for configuring SSHD, for configuring ETC security limits, and for configuring TCP wrappers. And one thing that is not immediately clear, and I want to make clear to you, is that none of these are things that you run on the command line. It's not like you say, okay, now I want TCP routers for so-and-so open, and that's it, and it's a one-off operation. All of these are things that you express in your CFEngine policy. And you don't even, with sketches, you don't even have to modify the policy by hand. You load the sketch, and you tell it, I want to activate the sketch with these parameters. And that goes into your policy, and then CFEngine starts checking and rechecking it automatically. So you don't have to be paying attention to ensure that the conditions are met. CFEngine will take care of it automatically and just keep it according to the parameters that you expressed. We have a whole bunch of sketches for configuring basic system parameters, everything from ETC hosts, time zone config, crontab entries, sysctl entries, and other things. And we have a bunch of miscellaneous utility sketches, for example, for pinging a set of machines and reporting on which ones are alive and which ones are not. It's a very simple monitoring mechanism. A utility, this was actually contributed by one of our customers that says, they call it cowboy mode. It says, well, sometimes the sysadmin is on a machine and is trying to fix a problem by hand because it's some emergency. But if bringing things back to the configuration, I just want to stop it for a little bit. Let me play with the system by hand. So they enable cowboy mode. They touch a file and then CFEngine stops temporarily on that machine so they can fix things, and then they can move whatever they did back into the policy, remove the file, and now CFEngine will take over and then now with the changes that were made. We can, this sketch that allows us to call particular bundles depending on the MAC address of a machine. This allows you to, for example, have a certain set of configurations on certain machines or on certain networks, depending on how things are configured. Sketches for setting up a version control system clones or checklists of repositories. Installing a full WordPress installation. This is actually very neat. You just tell it, okay, I want to use, you give it database name, database user and password, and then it goes and does the entire WordPress install and gives you a new WordPress site. And also Yale University, they are big users of CFEngine, and they contributed their own internal standard library to the Design Center. And we have several more that are in the process of being fine-tuned for actual publications. These are the things that you can already download and use. And you could say it's a really small number, but they have some very interesting capabilities. And some of them, like cloud services or like database install, they allow you to do a very large and interesting set of configuration tasks with very little code, which is the entire point of the Design Center. So we'd like to invite you to join the CFEngine and the Design Center family. Check it out on GitHub, for repository, look at it, make your own changes, play with it. Feel free to contact us or contact me personally if you have any comments or any questions. I'd be happy to give you a card afterward if you're interested, otherwise my email address is all over the place. The CFEngine help forums are a friendly place where you can ask questions, and we also have an IRC channel that has come back to life in the last few months after some time of inactivity, so that's also a very good place for asking questions. And with that, I would like to thank you. I think I still have some time left over, so if you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them now.